All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Bleav in Bills. Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV, and there he is, Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. Sal, it's been about a week since we've done one of these, but it's time to start ramping it back up. How you doing?
I am good. Just as I told you off air, spent some time with the dealership this morning. That was great, and then came home and did my 2-mile walk. Just got in, so I'm ready to roll here.
Yeah, I got to give you credit.
Got a little sweat going on here, but that's okay.
Which is not, I'll tell you what, lovely winter we're having.
Oh my God, it's brutal. It's relentless. Shoveled again this morning. So
yeah,
actually I'm looking forward to going to Indy next week. It'll feel like it's Florida over there when I get there.
I know. It has been unbelievable this year. I give you credit though. You're out there. Every time I've called you to coordinate this thing, you're out walking the dog. So,
Yep.
You're a hardy soul, man. We've known that for a long time. All right. So some things why don't we start off with, the combine set for next week. You're flying over Monday morning. We're going to hear from Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. We're going to get to that, I think, in some of, as we begin to look toward the draft. And, we'll do so many of these shows analyzing what the Bills might do when you're picking 30th. It's more of a crapshoot, obviously. But in the meantime, they got some serious decisions to make in-house, right?
They do.
And a lot of it has to do with that 2022 draft class. There's been a lot of discussion about James Cook. Christian Benford is going to be key for them into the future, I think. Terrell Bernard, Shakir, Greg Rousseau was 2021, obviously, but he's entering the final year as well, and there's some decisions to make with reference to him. So I guess we'll start this by put yourself in Brandon Beane's shoes. Who are you prioritizing sort of in that mix as you look to make decisions on who to retain and set up for long term?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a tough job that he has, and he gets paid very well to do it, but there are going to be some decisions that he's not going to want to make. And, one of their stated goals all the time, Adam, is draft and develop, right? They want to draft their guys. They want to coach them up to the point where they can get them second contracts and keep the ball rolling. And you can't do it with all of them, though. It's just not possible in this day and age of the salary cap. So they've got some tough calls to make. I think the large consensus of people out there would agree that Christian Benford should be the number one priority because you just don't find, elite cornerbacks. He probably isn't elite, but he's very, very good. You don't just find those guys all the time. And that very draft class is the proof of that. They picked Kyrie Elam in the first round, and it's been a complete flop. Luckily, they bailed themselves out in the 6th round of that draft with Benford. So they've got him established. I thought he had a great season in 2024, and they've got to prioritize him, as far as I'm concerned, as the number one priority, especially when you consider Rasul Douglas is probably going to be gone in free agency because I don't think they should pay him. So they've got no cornerbacks on this team. You better keep Christian Benford in place. So he's number one for me. And then number 2 is really tricky. And you can make a case. I think James Cook, let's start there. He's 5th on my list. He's right. The last guy that you have to worry about as far as the extension. But those 2, 3, 4 spots are really, really tricky. You've got Shakir, Bernard, and Rousseau. You can make a strong case for all of those guys being the number 2 priority, right? I mean, Rousseau is a good edge rusher. I don't think he's a difference-making game wrecker, but do you really want to give up on him after this season when he plays out the 5th-year option? I don't know. I mean, $25 million is probably the going rate. It's a lot of money to pay Greg Rousseau when, he's probably not in that elite class, but I don't know if you want to get rid of him either. Bernard is one of your captains on defense. I didn't think he had a great year, Adam. We could talk about that if you want. I mean, he's an important player for them, but he was not the same guy, I don't think, that he was in 2023. I thought his level of play came down a bit. So what do you do with him? Do you firmly believe that he's 2023 version, or, is he an undersized guy that may have already hit his ceiling? I don't know. And then Shakir is their best receiver at this point. Until they add to that group, you don't want to take a weapon away from Josh Allen. So I don't know. And then James Cook, who, like I said, I would move on from Cook unless he really comes back at a team-friendly deal you can find running backs, I think. So I don't know. Can they get all 5 of these guys done with their salary cap situation? Probably not. But they've got some tough decisions to make for sure.
I don't have a problem with them letting this play out on a couple of them. You know what I mean?
True.
I mean, you went through and kind of outlined all of them. I think you did a good job of doing it. I agree mostly with what you said. I feel like, beyond Benford, who is obvious. And, oh, by the way, he's going to be expensive. If you want to get him done, now the projection's upwards of what, $22 million, right? Given his numbers and level of performance. You talk about a home run and a 6th-round pick for Brandon Beane. That may be one of his best picks ever. So, I mean, in this day and age, in this conference especially, in this league, given what it is, you need a top-level cornerback, especially when you have major questions about what's going to happen across from him. And you whiffed on Elam, which was painfully obvious in the AFC Championship game once again. So you've got to take care of Benford. I agree with that.
They may catch a break on Benford, too, because I think you and I can agree he probably should have been a Pro Bowl player. I don't think he was quite all-pro level, but he probably should have been a Pro Bowler. And these agents and these teams, they use things like that in the negotiation. The Bills might have caught a break that he didn't get. They can go and say, well, he's not a Pro Bowler, and they can use that argument. It'd be stupid, but they can definitely put that in their corner, and maybe you would get him at a little bit lesser of what the projection might be on him. That's just throwing it out there. It's possible.
All right. So if I'm Beane, I factor all this into my decision making, obviously. But other than Benford, where is the value? Who do I think is going to project, very well moving forward? And if they could get them to a long-term deal now, relative to how they're going to manage the cap moving forward or whatever. And as I go through that list, Bernard's the guy I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
Where
for value, you're right.
For value, right? So get him done. Shakir, as valuable a weapon as he is for this offense, I mean, on most good teams, he's what? Is he your 3rd receiver?
2 or 3, I would say, but 2 or 3 for sure.
2 or 3. I mean, what do you want to pay him?
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's right. the decision you have to make, especially when you need to add in a significant way to that group. And
I mean, he's a 5th round pick who is a slot receiver. So they shouldn't have to break the bank to keep him. You're right. And Bernard was a 3rd round pick, undersized linebacker. As I just said, I mean, coming off a year that he was good, not great. You're right. Strike now, because you should be able to get some value out of those 2 guys coming off of last year, I would think. Who knows? But that's what I think.
And Rousseau, I would agree with you. I'm not ready to commit big money to him. Just not consistent enough, right?
No.
It's
going to cost a lot of money to lock him up. It will.
And is he a piece you might move? If you're going to make a move and deal and trade and look to kind of go all in, like a Miles Garrett type situation. Is Rousseau part of that deal?
Yeah.
I mean,
you do that. You do that, and you're probably moving on from Von Miller. At least they should. The smart move would be to move on from him. If you trade Rousseau, then you're back to you need to find another edge rusher, another good edge rusher. Let's say you traded for Miles Garrett or even Maxx Crosby, 2 superstar players. Okay, that's great. But then what are you doing if you don't have Rousseau? Now you got to fill that spot. And if you don't do it adequately, now those guys are going to get all the double and triple teams, and you're maybe negating what they could be. That's the issue with Rousseau if you included him in the trade. But I understand it might be the cost of doing business. And then what you got to do is make sure you go in the draft and find a guy and not whiff. Like, I think they kind of whiffed on AJ Epinesa. He's a guy. He's a rotational guy. Boogie Basham was obviously a whiff. He was a nothing guy. You've got to go get one in this trade. If you're going to get Miles Garrett on the team and Rousseau's part of the package going back, you better replace Rousseau with a guy who can start, not just be a rotational guy.
All right. Agreed. James Cook, just a final thought on him. I just let him play out next year, right? Yeah. There's no way $15 million. No. It's just, I think you draft a running back at this point this year, and we can talk about that as we look toward the draft and the combine and everything else. In your mind, though, beyond next season, does the franchise tag come into play potentially
for Cook?
Yeah.
I mean, it could, because the franchise tag on running backs is the cheapest one out there outside of the special teams guys. This year, I think it's like $13 million. So can you do that? Can you have Cook play on his rookie deal this year, which is nothing? I think it's $5 million or whatever he cost this year. And yeah, you could potentially franchise him at $13 million for the 1 year. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to pay a guy. And, I don't know if you saw my story about what I wrote about Cook last week. My issue with him is the snap counts, right? I mean, he played 45% of the snaps. He wants $15 million to play 45% of the snaps. That's insane. So unless you're going to all of a sudden make him your third down back, which, I don't know if he's good enough to do that. He's a terrible pass protector. He's been okay as a pass receiver. Unless you're going to shoot him up to 80% of your snap count, which I don't see them doing, I can't imagine you're paying James Cook 8 figures a year. So even the $13 million franchise tag, that might be a little bit rich for my blood too.
It's just that, he had such an impact as far as what the Bills were able to do. It had to do with more than James Cook, but he clearly showed himself as an elite.
He did. He played really well. You look at his numbers, he actually was down from 2023. I mean, I think he was 5th or 6th in the league in rushing that last year. He was 19th in rushing yards this past year. So his yardage productivity came down, yards from scrimmage came down, but what popped was the touchdowns, right? I mean, he became a touchdown machine because they finally trusted him to do it. They probably could have been doing that in 2023 too, but they had Latavius Murray for some reason being their goal line guy, which was completely stupid. So the touchdowns really popped this year, but was he any better a player than he was previously? I'm not quite sure I'm ready to go there on James Cook.
All right, one thing we should mention that's come down since last we spoke here on the show, the salary cap. Teams have been informed that it's going to be anywhere, $277.5 million to 281.5.
Yeah,
anywhere in there, up from 255.4 this past year. So it's more of a jump than a lot of general managers had anticipated. That'll certainly help the Bills and others as well, as because they've got a lot of areas to address.
I mean, it's tough to pin down the numbers. You can go to 3 different sites, and the number the Bills are over is different on each one of them. But you're in the $8 to $12 million range, I would say, on average, that they're over right now, and that's even with the 277 to 281 salary cap. So they've still got issues, but it's certainly, and Bean talked about this at his end of season presser. They're certainly in a better spot than they were last year when he had to trim. I forget what the number was, but it was a massive amount that they had to get off the books. So they're in better position, and they definitely have a couple, I think, pretty obvious levers to pull. And Von Miller is clearly the number one guy that you get rid of. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be in decent shape. And, he says every year they're not going to be big spenders in free agency, and then they end up spending in free agency. So he'll find a way to do it. But again, this year, though, those contract extensions that we already talked about are definitely going to chew into what they can do on the outside free agent market.
All right, so we'll get into much more of that. First, a quick word from the sponsor here. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA, as well as college hoops, NHL, and the UFC. Bet Online, the game starts here. So it's wheels up for you, Sal, Monday morning. You head for Indianapolis and the scouting combine. General Manager Brandon Beane, head coach Sean McDermott are going to be having their news conferences there. And so a lot of these questions and issues, it'll be the first time we've really had the chance to speak to them. The media has since their end of season news conferences. And then you begin to look toward the draft. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I think there's 3 areas for me. Defensive line is the biggest. I mean, that's just been borne out the way this season came to an end. It's an obvious area. What the Philadelphia Eagles showed in the Super Bowl and their win over the Chiefs. The good news is that this is a very good draft for the defensive line. But the Bills also, I think, for reasons we just discussed earlier, I think cornerback has to be a priority without question. Receiver, they need to add, whether it's via the draft or free agency there. And with questions about James Cook, it would not shock me, not necessarily early, but I would like them to add a running back as well. As you head for Indy, kind of what's on your list for areas of focus for you?
Yeah, to me, I mean, and when you talk about defensive line, I think you need to segment it because we've already talked about this. They're going to need an edge rusher, but to me, the number one priority is getting a defensive tackle. They have got to get bigger on the inside of that line. It's been a noticeable problem for them. Daquan Jones, he could be a cap casualty. I mean, you move on from him, they would say, I forget what the number is, but there is some decent savings there. I don't think they'll do that. But, there's a guy, 33 years old. He's just not the same player that he was before that pec injury early in 23. I thought he had a decent year, but you can be better than Daquan Jones in the middle. Ed Oliver just can't be who he can be without a bigger man next to him. And they don't have that. Dwayne Carter certainly isn't that player. He's 302 pounds. You need a bigger guy than Dwayne Carter. And I'm not even sure what Dwayne Carter is because I don't think he was very good as a rookie. He was only a rookie. Hopefully he gets better, but they need to be better than him for sure. I don't think you're going to re-sign Jordan Phillips. That'll happen in November, right? For the fourth time, they'll bring him back and whatever, and he'll lead the cheers and be Jordan Phillips. Quentin Jefferson, with Austin Johnson, I don't think they're going to bring those guys back. So they've got to get a tackle. To me, it's a first-round priority. I mean, there are some guys that some of the draft experts are talking about might be there at that 30th pick. Maybe Bean makes a trade up to go get one of them. I don't know what the plan is, but I think adding bulk in the middle of the line is really important. We've already talked about edge rusher. If you're gonna not get a Miles Garrett type, you're probably gonna then have to extend Rousseau, and he needs help. They got to have a guy that they can put on the other side of the line that can bring out the best in both of those guys. So I think edge rusher and, as you said, cornerback. Now, it doesn't look like it's a great cornerback draft, at least early. I think there was like 3 guys who are consensus first-round picks, and they're probably all going to be gone before the Bills think about doing it. I think second round might be the sweet spot to find a cornerback, but they need one. I mean, they're going to need somebody to be a starter, Adam. Now, I think the better route to find that guy is probably free agency. I think you're going to be able to find some guys, not the elite kind of guys, but there'll be those mid-tier free agents who I think the Bills can probably bring in maybe on a 1-year deal and have that guy start and then draft a cornerback and get him ready to go as the primary backup because it's not going to be Elam. And then maybe he's your starter down the road. And as we said, that all hinges on make sure you get Benford extended. So those are the 3 areas that they really have to nail. And I would use the first 2 picks. Actually, they have 3. They have 2 second-rounders. You might see them using the first 3 picks on those areas right there.
Before we wrap this up, I just want to – I think it's important to maybe zoom out a little bit. And I know we've made this point, but it bears repeating here. This goes back to the first AFC championship loss to Kansas City, right? And it was obvious they needed to reconstruct and upgrade the defensive front, right? And so they've done that, and they still haven't ultimately found the answer. And I think what's important to point out, especially relative to the approach that the Philadelphia Eagles have taken, right, over the years and how that thing is built and what they were able to do with 4, right, and their win over the Chiefs. I mean, I think the point is this, that there needs to be a philosophical shift by Brandon Beane, his staff, Sean McDermott, whatever. Not that, I mean, they've built it for, I mean, they're nimble, they're quick, there's mobility there. They a lot of times can get to the perimeter, that side of a thing, those types of thing, but inside bulk, you said it. They need girth. It's that inside pressure that is so disruptive. And I think they've, in terms of their selections, they haven't emphasized size enough. And I think that's the model, and they've fallen short of that. And there needs to be that change as they look to build this thing moving forward.
Really, throughout McDermott's entire coaching tenure, going back to Philly and Carolina as a coordinator, he has always emphasized he wants quick guys that can get upfield and, push the pocket, be disruptors in the backfield. And I think you need to play better at the line of scrimmage. It's great if they can get upfield and do all those things, but you need to hold the point of attack against these teams that are now focusing a little bit more on the running game, right? I mean, the league goes in cycles. And right now, the majority of the teams that made the playoffs, I think it was 7 of the top 10 teams that made the playoffs, 7 playoff teams were in the top 10 in rushing in 2024. There is an emphasis now on the rushing game. The Bills are an obvious example of that. So you need to be better at the point of attack. It's great to have an Ed Oliver who can get upfield because he's quick, like you said, and nimble and all that. But it sure would have been nice if they had picked T'Vondre Sweat in the second round last year when he was sitting right there to be taken. Instead of Keon Coleman, they could have gotten their huge defensive tackle right then and there. He ends up going about 4 picks later to the Titans, had a great season. That's the kind of guy you're looking for. And there are a couple of those guys that are in this draft. Who knows if they're going to be as good as him, but there are a couple of guys in that 330 to 340 pound range that I think the Bills just have to take a swing at.
I agree 100%. It has to be a priority, and they have to go about it. And in terms of the type of player that they're drafting at that position, prioritize different aspects of it as we had discussed. All right, Sal Maiorana. Nice being back with you here on the show. We're going to be doing these weekly, and I think we have multiples coming next week, don't you? I know that we're looking to have Marcellus Wiley, former Buffalo Bill, on the show midweek next week. That should be happening, and I think we'll be doing another show as well in response to some of what we hear from Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane as well. So we'll look for your coverage in the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. We continue, by the way, on Channel 2 with Sports Talk Live every Monday night at 7 o'clock on WGRZ with Vic Carucci and John Scott. Travel safely, my friend.
Yeah, what's going on with all these plane crashes. I'm a little worried.
I know.
Never really thought about plane crashes, but geez. And that one in Toronto was a little bit too close for comfort for us here. So, yeah, hope it all goes well, Adam. I won't be bitching about if I'm delayed somewhere. How's that?
No, right. Don't. Fingers crossed. Sal, appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you next week.
All right, Adam.
All right. Thanks for being with us here on Bleav in Bills.